All right, Mr. Grogan, how are you?
I'm good.
All right, for the audience that doesn't know you, feel free to introduce yourself.
I'm John. On a lot of things, I'm known as the lie detector guy. Been a polygraph guy since the 80s. I do a lot of reality TV shows and social media shows, but most days I'm just testing cheating spouses and people that want to become cops.
Okay, so it's funny because I've seen you everywhere. Like every time there's a lie detector show, I've seen you. And I remember when we spoke over the phone, one of the things I asked you was, why you? Why are you the guy that every single time there's a lie detector on a show, they always call you. I've seen you with YouTubers and all these different people. It's just always you. So why you specifically?
Well, most polygraph examiners wouldn't stand for all the waiting around that the filming does. You do a little bit of filming and then wait an hour before the next scene. And that's not what they're doing polygraph for. So I've learned to deal with it and it works out fine.
So basically, you're just more patient than the rest of them.
Yes, and also I know it's just for fun, so I don't take it seriously in a lot of cases.
Well, with regards to the more serious work that you do, um, you how many interview? And I want this to be your words when you say this. How many interviews exactly, like about, have you done?
Well, I've tested over 13,000 people since I started in the 80s.
So with 13,000 polygraph examinations and lie detectors that you've done, well, number one, why did you get started to begin with?
Well, California, where I'm based, it has 58 counties. And in the 58 counties, back when I started, there was about 50 examiners, about one per county. Then a law changed that made a lot of them retire. And that's back when polygraph was an old antique, anyhow. And then now, today, there's probably not even 30 working polygraph examiners in the 58 counties.
So with the 13,000 interviews that you've done, and you've done countless of them, right? 30,000 is a huge number. So with that, what have you learned about a lot of the people that come in? Like, who are the majority of your audience?
90% of private polygraph work is relationship or infidelity, where one party thinks the other might have cheated. And we've learned that just because they look innocent doesn't mean they are. And just because they look like maybe a rough person, that they're bad.
I remember you mentioned about the importance of transparent, clear lie detection. I don't know if that was a word you used, but lie detection where the people can see um, that you are doing the lie detection, and that there's no corruption, and there's in the practice, right? And that you mentioned that people will try to bribe lie detector polygraph examiners all the time.
Polygraph is just a medical test. It's reading your blood, sweat, and breathing changes as you answer a 10-question format of yes or no questions. And in that 10 questions, up to four come from the client or are about the current situation. And because the results could change a marriage or a relationship or a job or even freedom, some people offer examiners bribes, and unfortunately, some take it. So over the years, we've said never trust a polygraph unless you get to watch it. The examiner doesn't have a big enough office that you can be watching conveniently, perhaps in another room watching a big screen monitor. Or if they don't have room for that, they can set up a baby monitor and you hold the receiver outside. But some examiners are hesitant. They don't want to be seen doing the test by the client. So we'll take that work because we tell them trust it only if you watch it, especially if your person passed.
What's one of the biggest lies that you've seen somebody try to get away with that was figured out because of you?
We've seen people get caught lying for cheating in relationships and sex with people they shouldn't have done, and then all kinds of crimes from murder to burglary to theft.
How common are the murders?
We do a lot of murder polygraphs, but it's usually for defense attorneys, and they want to see how their client would do before they take them and allow the police to test them. And sometimes my opinion is let him take it for the police. He easily passed. Other times we'll say, I think this guy did it. You don't want him anywhere near a polygraph.
So are there ever people that, they come in completely calm, and you would think that they haven't done the crime and you're kind of shocked at the results?
Well, part of being transparent isn't just to let the client or the suspecting spouse watch. It's we also let the person being tested watch a mirrored version on a big screen monitor where no other examiner allows that. They're quietly looking at their laptop and don't want the examinee to see it. We found people are less likely to argue the results or dispute them if they got to see what their body did microscopically on every question.
What's a circumstance where somebody has contested it to the extreme, like straight up denying reality? Have you seen that?
Some will say, but I didn't cheat on my spouse with her sister. We'll say, okay, we're going to have you watch this. We're going to do a chart now with you watching it instead of just sitting there with your eyes closed. And you watch what your body microscopically does on have you ever ate at McDonald's? You watch what your body does when today is Wednesday and we ask you, is it Tuesday? And you say no. Then watch what your body does when you calmly answer no to the sex with the wife's sister. Your body it's betraying your mouth. You're saying you didn't, your body's exploding. You did do it. And a lot of times they'll say, yeah, I did.
One of the problems that people point out with polygraphs is that there are, and this is something Jeanette and I talk about, which is that there are people that are just so good at remaining calm. Some people, with antisocial personality disorder, for example, or a fancy term for psychopathy, they typically have no remorse or no understanding of really what they did was wrong. So therefore, their blood pressure or whatever metrics you use just don't rise because they're not nervous. So when it comes to those have you seen those circumstances where somebody definitely did it, but it's just nothing picks up because they're just not nervous?
There are what you call good liars, but if they know they're lying, they're also hoping to not get caught. And they may be able to play with their heartbeat a little, maybe even their breathing, but they can't change the moisture at the fingers. And that's where we get the majority of our scoring, at the fingers.
So when it comes to, seeing thousands of liars and thousands of truth tellers, what separates them exactly? Like other than a biological level, right? Like what separates a truth teller and a liar from, a visual or, from just a person to person perspective, not even looking at the results?
I'm not sure what you mean, but some people that we talk to, they cannot confess. We'll ask somebody, a wife that's there to test because the husband, something tipped him off that maybe she's been seeing somebody else. And we'll ask, if you happen to have done that and you admitted it to him, would he forgive you and work it out or not? And when they say, oh no, he's already said, if I find out you did that, we're divorcing. So there's no reason for the person to admit it.
Well, I mean, as in, other than looking at the results, I'm saying from a scientific standpoint, I'm saying, because you're judging if somebody's a liar or not based on purely the results usually, but from observing this thousands of times, I'm saying, has there been any tells of, a liar versus a truth teller from the person themselves, not looking at the numbers, not just from experience and just from observation, just the differences that you've noticed between the two people?
Okay, decades ago, we scored what was called globally. That means not just what we saw on the chart, but how they sat and if they leaned in nicely to talk to you and other mannerisms. But then it was found That's how certain spies were getting past FBI polygraphs. If they had looked back at those spies' tests and they only went by what was on the chart and not the bonus good boy points they got for sitting properly and smiling nice, they would have failed. So decades ago, instructions changed to you will not care what they look like or any of their mannerisms. You will go strictly by your chart, to the point where you should be able to show those charts to the next examiner who didn't see the test, and that examiner get the same fail or pass score that you come up with.
Have there been any circumstances where, in your own personal life, right, where somebody's lied to you and you've been able to spot it just from your given experience?
Sure, when you have kids, you get to know how they act when they're upset or hiding something.
What's the number one thing that people lie about?
Cheating in a relationship.
What have you
Cheating.
learned? Were you saying something?
I didn't know if you needed the whole sentence, but cheating in a relationship is the most common test that we see. Second most would probably be theft. We're in a state where marijuana dispensaries are legal, and so those are all cash businesses, and they're dealing with people that probably use the product that they sell. Very common to lose big chunks of money and big chunks of their product. So we do a lot of testing for them.
Have you seen anybody lie about something so minor that you really didn't understand why they lied?
Sure, and we asked them. For example, one time I had to go to a prison to test some guy. And I get there, he's in a big, giant guy, and he was accused of spitting on one of the guards, the officers there. And his family had to pay a big fee for me to come up to the prison and do a test on him. And it was, did you spit on that officer? And he failed badly and badly. And then I asked him, you clearly did it. He goes, yeah, I know. And I said, then why did you have your family spend all that money? He said, well, because I have a chance at parole next year if I can beat that accusation. And this was my only hope, a polygraph.
Have you seen anybody just totally untrustworthy or untrustworthy of the person that they're accusing of lying, right? And like to the point where it's unnecessary of how paranoid they are about whatever they did. Let's just say a cheating spouse, and they have like no evidence of it at all. There's no signs, and they adamantly, for example, I'm naming a hypothetical example, and they think that their spouse did it or is, and they just have a suspicion, and it's very vague, and you don't really understand why they would even think that to begin with, and you even think that the guy's innocent, and they, like about those cases, for example. Do you get those often or at all?
Well, sometimes a guy will just swear, I know my wife is cheating. I just know it in my heart. And it usually turns out that he's a big cheater and he's just projecting it back on her. But we do the test. We're neutral. We don't want to hear any of his supposed evidence because we want to be completely neutral and non-prejudiced. And a lot of times people completely pass. But sometimes we will get polygraphs where somebody tested elsewhere and they said, oh, my husband passed, but I know he cheated. And then they don't want to tell me the reason, and that's fine. We don't even know if they're telling the truth. But then we'll test them and they'll fail, and then they confess that they've used prostitutes or other cheating involved. And probably the biggest mistake we see with examiners that don't have a lot of experience is in the hot weather, people are dehydrated, or if they're certain substance abusers, they're dehydrated. And the number one thing we're reading is moisture changes at the fingers. So if they're dehydrated, it's like a car without gas can't get a speeding ticket. There's no way they can make a big green mountain on the computer screen if they're out of moisture at their fingers. So the examiner doesn't care. They'll just test a guy with no moisture at his fingers, and then all that leaves is the blood and breathing, and that's not enough to do an accurate test. So we got to give them water, wait a half hour for it to leave their stomach and get out to their tissues. And then they easily fail if they're lying.
Are there circumstances where people go to tremendous lengths to try and falsify their tests, right? And what have you seen people try and do to falsify their tests if they can? Kind of like a drug test. And when I'm saying that, like people try to falsify drug tests all the time, especially randomized ones, So what have you seen people try to do to falsify polygraph tests, for example?
When people try to beat a polygraph, in a lot of cases, it's called a countermeasure. That's any physical attempt to try to beat a polygraph. In the old days, they talked about putting a tack in their shoe and touching it. But unless you touch it on the right question or two during the pattern, it doesn't help you pass or help you fail. It's a waste of time. But a lot of the prisoners in prison for sex crimes, they know when they get out, they're going to have to take polygraphs every 3 months. So they teach each other in prison what the pattern of questions that's going to be used is, and on certain questions, which one you should squeeze your butt muscle, and that'll artificially raise your blood and sweat on that answer, and it'll kind of mask that you were failing on more important questions. So then about a decade ago, polygraphs started coming with pads you sit on that detect if there's any such squeezing of the butt muscle.
Are there any like old wives' tales that people have tried to use?
There's old wives' tales like spray antiperspirant on your fingertips. That'll prevent the sweat, but maybe it actually does slow it a little. But polygraph's a comparison test. So we ask them a couple of questions. We know they're telling the truth, and we adjust the sweat to where it's making 1 inch mountains when they answer truthfully. And then we ask them one of the client questions. So antiperspirant on the fingers doesn't work at all. Then certain people take drugs and hope that that will do something, but all that does is affect all the questions equally, so it doesn't help them pass at all. Now, there's a reason polygraph's called a lie detector test and not a truth detector test. The federal government's had polygraph academies for over 50 years where they spend your taxpayer dollars experimenting and experimenting. And what they've developed is all the little microscopic things that a body can do when you're lying. There's no similar thing that appears when you're telling the truth. For example, there's a homeless guy downstairs from our office building. He walks around in a robe and tells people, I am Jesus Christ. If he took a polygraph, he would pass. He's not lying, but that's what he believes is to be true. So on a lie detector, he wouldn't be showing signs of deception. We're not saying he's Jesus Christ, but he's not purposely being deceptive about it.
So it only works if the person is trying to purposely be deceptive.
Yes.
Okay. So what if, or not what if, I'm sorry, but what about, for example, if there's a person that, you know, actually, I'll ask this. I'll ask this question later. I was gonna say, when it comes to what you've learned in general about doing all of this, right? If there was one thing that you could point out as being the most important thing that you've learned about the 13,000 plus interviews that you've done about people, about lying, whatever, what is the most important thing that you've learned?
Most important thing I've learned, and I make sure all the clients know it, is there's 2 ways to fail a polygraph: lying and not following directions. The directions are simple: be hydrated and sit still. That means answering with your mouth only for the 5 minutes it takes for each chart collection. And normally there's 3 chart collections. If they shake their head when they're told answer with their mouth only, that's enough to raise their blood and sweat, the same as it would if they had lied. So they failed just because they moved. And that's another reason why we let them watch the screen so they can see their bodies going crazy. And we say, we just saw you shake your head no when you're supposed to use your mouth only.
Are there any body language? I know you mentioned this before, that it's not entirely a good way of telling a lie between body language, but if we're talking about, some of the tells that you might commonly see when people happen to be lying, if there are any correlations that you might have noticed.
I've taken body language classes in the past, and I understand some of it, and some of it works good. And there's some people that you've already talked to that are great body language experts. I remember looking up when answering. If you look up to one way, it usually indicates lie, that you're trying to think up a lie, and looking to the other way means you're really trying to grab a memory of truth. But we are trained and instructed to ignore all body language and go strictly by our charts.
So, does it only work for yes or no questions?
The reason polygraph is yes or no is because there's less debate. And probably most important is we're reading microscopic changes to the breathing with each answer. And it looks like a long set of 2 rows of shark teeth. And by answering a one syllable yes or no, it doesn't really interrupt that breathing pattern much. But if they want to give a multi word answer like, no, I didn't, or huh, that's enough to slow the breathing to where the computer scoring will pick up on it as a sign of deception and fail them on that.
So now when it comes to more generally, just lying in general, and the fact, why do you think so many people are lying, right? Like, why do you think that so many people lie all the time, and especially in a circumstance where there's really no point in lying because their body will likely give them away?
Well, some people think they're good liars because they've gotten away with it lying to their bosses and their spouse and their moms and dads. But most that come to us, they have a big consequence if they get caught lying. It's either going to be relationship or theft. And that's why polygraph counts on fear of detection. There must be a consequence. If I wired you up now, knowing you have a blue shirt, and I said, okay, I'm going to ask you, do you have a white shirt on? And I want you to say yes. That would not show up as a lie. Your body would not produce the reactions of deception because there's no consequence to getting caught. That's why we can't do fun polygraphs. Every once in a while, a client will come in and they've been instructed, come in with your 1 to 4 yes or no questions written on a piece of paper that you want asked. And they say, okay, we'll have the 4 questions ready. And we say, no, it was 1 to 4. If all you need to know is, did she have sex with your brother? Don't make up 3 other questions to fill it in. It's not an all you can eat restaurant. All that will do is take away the focus from it all being about her and your brother.
Are there any are there any Actually, I'll ask this. So one thing I have thought about is that lying is usually a precursor, and to doing bad things, and it's kind of a gateway when it comes to bad behavior, because it one lie leads to the next to the next. Do you agree with that philosophy, that lying is usually a precursor to immorality, or doing bad things? I think, at least.
Probably someone that lies on something is going to lie on other things. But polygraph accuracy is so accurate that in most states you can't become a cop without passing one. And 1 out of 3 fails and cannot be hired. And same with federal agencies like FBI, 1 out of 3 fails. But Border Patrol can't hire anybody. More than half of their applicants are failing their polygraph. And what's left in the group that did pass usually is disqualified because of credit or other problems in their past.
What's the biggest lie somebody's ever told you?
We have people lying to us all the time about theft and sexual acts that they fail, and later most of them admit the truth. Because sometimes when they confess, we tell them, we need to make sure you didn't falsely confess. We're now going to do a test using your confessions and make sure. Because sometimes a woman will say, well, I only had sex with the guy 2 times. But if we ask her, did you have sex with him more than 2 times, she'll fail, and we'll have to bump up the number a few times before the person gets a pass.
What's the worst thing that you've seen somebody lie about?
We've seen people lie about major crimes or child abuse, um, all the typical crimes you see on any news.
Are there any ones that stick with you?
No, we purposely don't try to remember. I have people every month come in for a test, and in the chit chat portion, I ask them, "Have you ever taken a polygraph test?" And they said, "Yeah, about 2 months ago." And they said, "Oh, where?" And they say, "Here." I just plain don't remember them. We have a lot of people coming in, and we purposely don't want to remember people's private situations.
Are there any stories that you have in general that stick out to you?
They're all the same. It's people either lying about doing a serious crime or a minor crime or cheating in a relationship. And sometimes a girlfriend or a boyfriend will have questions. The one we had today, we had 2 different tests in the last couple of hours, and one of them was the girl found a butterfly earring under her boyfriend's seat and wanted to know where that came from. And then one later was a guy who, whatever reason, thought that his wife was using some bone conduction microphone to confidentially talk to other people. But she passed on that. She hasn't used any bone conduction microphone.
What is the craziest? What's the craziest lie that somebody has? And I'm not talking about even the morality of it, but like, has there ever been something that's just like really out of the ordinary that somebody's tried to lie about, and it might stick with you a little bit?
Well, for example, a guy came to us and he says, "Hey, I'm being charged by the police of installing a webcam in some girl's house where I was helping her with a computer." And we asked him on the test if he did that, and he kept failing. And then he tells us, "Well, the police have it as well as the footage. It's got some sort of internal memory card, and it shows me even setting it up in her room." So we got to wonder, why are you even here? They've got video of you installing this in the girl's room and adjusting it where you could see her undressing or whatever it was about. So he was already caught on video, and he was hoping a polygraph could help him beat it.
So when it comes to the courtroom, for example, right? Um, it's I believe polygraphs cannot be used as convictable evidence. That's correct.
It depends. In some states, they're completely usable, like New Mexico. In federal, almost always, because our federal government is the biggest user of polygraph in the world. They do a couple of 100,000 tests a year. So they can't turn around in a federal case and say, we don't want to accept polygraph. It's not 100% accurate. In fact, there's a 28-page Supreme Court decision that says they can't tell people you can't use it in a federal matter when they're the biggest users of polygraph themselves. Um, I do a lot for immigration matters, and those polygraphs are routinely accepted by the immigration judges.
What's the percentage that you would say like people tell lies versus people tell the truth? Like, how often are people failing these?
When people come to us and they think their partner might be cheating, usually they're right. Because most guys and gals, they don't even know the cheating's going on. So by the time they're actually suspicious of it, it usually has happened. So almost always when somebody comes in, I'd say at least 3 out of 4 times they fail their polygraph.
Is there anybody that you've even felt like a little bit bad for, like they committed the act, but like, maybe they immediately start sobbing, or like they have a lot to lose, or they're nervous like straight from the get-go. Um, like any of those circumstances where you kind of feel a little bit bad for the person, or no?
Well, sometimes people will come to us in their 70s and they want to know about something that happened 50 years ago. And they've had a decent marriage, but it's always bugged the husband. He thought for sure that when he was first dating this lady, or it could be the lady suspecting the man, that might have done something sexual with another person. But for 50 years have been saying no and no. And finally they said it's time for a polygraph. Then they fail and they confess. So, well, why didn't you just tell them? Save the cost of a polygraph and save 50 years of arguing. I said, because if I had admitted it, I would have heard about it every day since then. So I was better to deny it.
Has there ever been somebody that you have seen, they did this, actually, what, here's a better question. Have you seen, I think you touched on this a little bit before, but have you seen like routine people come to you, or routine people in your office, like prisoners or whatever, that are just always going to get a polygraph?
Well, we have some frequent clients. For example, some people that are sex offenders, it's called post conviction sexual offender tests, PCSOTs. They have to come in once in a while. They're called maintenance tests. Since your last polygraph, have you violated any of your conditions? Since your last polygraph, have you committed a crime? Since your last polygraph, have you lied to your parole officer? So those are regulars. Then there's husbands that have been to a counselor with their wives, or vice versa. And usually it's sex addiction. And they want to know if since their last polygraph or since their last therapy session, if they've done anything sexual with a person other than their spouse.
Do you have any advice um, for young people?
If you did a crime, don't take a polygraph. It's going to catch you. Don't try to bribe, because 99% of polygraph examiners will say no. Just make up another reason and don't take it. You don't believe in them, or you're feeling sick, because you're going to get caught. Just don't commit a crime. And if you do, don't take a polygraph.
Have you ever felt uncomfortable in a polygraph examination?
Um, Sometimes you can tell that if a person is going to get bad results when you test them, that they're going to have a tantrum or worse. So a lot of examiners say, all right, thank you for testing, call in a half hour for your results. And they give them the results remotely.
What are some of the biggest like outrages that you've seen people give you?
I've seen people get mad when they were cheating. And sometimes a person will come in and sit down and their spouse is quietly monitoring the test, and we'll ask, since you've been together, have you done anything sexual with another person? And they say yes. Say, uh, since you've been together with your current person, or since you've been married to that person, have you done anything sexual with your ex-girlfriend? Yes. Then when it's over, their person says, you just admitted everything. Why didn't you do that a couple of hours ago and we wouldn't have needed a polygraph test? But there are people that use polygraph as a scare tactic. They'll call us with their person sitting next to them crying, and they'll say, how much for a test? Actually, I don't care what it costs. I just want the best. I need to know if there's cheating going on. Those people never get tests.
What is your stance on, and I touched a little bit on this before, but what's your stance on the morality of lying, and is there ever a good time to lie?
The things that come to us, there's no good reason to lie. We're not talking white lies like, do you think I look good in this dress? And you say no, even though it's too small or some other way it's bad. We only get serious ones. But sometimes they'll come in with their 1 to 4 questions, and one of the 4 questions will be, is your dog's name Fido? And we'll say, what's this? Or is there some dispute about the dog's name? No, we just wanted to see how accurate the lie detector is. And then we got to explain to them that's not a question of consequence, and it doesn't matter if their dog's name is Ralph. They're not going to show signs of deception on a dog name question.
Do you do you ever see somebody lie and you're wondering to yourself, actually, you know what? Maybe here's a better question. What advice do you have for people that are trying to get into the lie detector industry?
There's actually less people in the industry every year. For example, in our state, California, there's at one time was 5 polygraph academies, and each of them were pumping out 10 graduates every 8 to 10 weeks. But then our governor did away with workers' comp rehab, where if you got injured on a job, you got retraining. And polygraph was kind of a dumping ground because your rehab counselor would tell you, well, your back injury keeps you from going to truck driver school, and you're probably not smart enough to go to computer repair school. So we're going to send you to polygraph because you can do that in your physical condition, and we'll pay you your 500 a week per diem while you sit there, and we'll buy you the equipment. And when it's all done, you get your 100 grand payout and you're off our back. And those guys would sleep through it because I was a polygraph instructor at a couple of schools. And when they'd finish, they'd sell their equipment for pennies on the dollar because they sure didn't need it. So we're down to one polygraph school in California now. I believe it doesn't always have classes when scheduled because they don't get enough signups. And most polygraph school students never have a successful business. They're probably fairly well trained, but nobody taught them the business end. In fact, most polygraph instructors have never had a successful polygraph business. Perhaps they worked for the state or for the federal government as an examiner. They never had to worry about getting clients and making clients happy and making clients choose them over the next examiner. So most examiner students a year after attending school are not even in the polygraph business.
What do you wish that people would do um, just less often, right? Or more often, even? What do you just wish that people would do more? If you could change people's behaviors, what would you wish that people would just do? Maybe more, maybe less. Just what do you wish that people would change about their behavior? At least in the context of actually, well, I'll let you talk.
Since most of our tests are for relationship, if they would just be honest, if they could be honest without the relationship ending, that would be great. They wouldn't need a polygraph, and probably they would never do whatever bad thing again.
Do you ever notice a commonality in why are people cheating, basically? I mean, I kind of know like the obvious answers, like maybe for the thrill, for the pleasure, or maybe they're just bored of the relationship, or they don't want to get a divorce but they want somebody else. But are there any commonalities like with cheating, like that you've seen?
Main commonality, almost all of them started out of the workplace.
How many, like percentage wise, would you say that are in the workplace?
9 out of 10 started in a workplace. If they have a job, that's where it's starting from.
What advice would you give somebody if they were trying to, in their daily life, just figure out if somebody's lying to them?
We would say divorce instead of cheat, then start a new relationship.
And when it comes to like more minor offenses, though, like if somebody's lying about something kind of minor, but you don't want to make a big deal out of it, but you want to figure it out for yourself. Like, is there any way to do something like that?
Sometimes we get kids. Now, some of the polygraph associations for 30 or 40 years have been saying that anybody age 12 or older can do a polygraph. But then some psychologists say that kids of 10 or 11 of today are sharper than kids of 12, 30, and 40 years ago. So sometimes we're testing kids for kind of ridiculous things, but the parents just don't want to put up with the lie. But we do academic ones because pretty popular is vaping at school. Teacher walks out, sees a few kids, there's a cloud of vape, they all get suspended. And then you get a parent say, kid, I want them polygraphed, so the school removes it from their record. And sometimes they're right, and other times they see their kid fail badly.
Going back again to the morality of lying and white lies, right? Is there ever a time where, is there ever a time in like your life, for example, that you would be willing to lie to somebody? Like I remember you mentioned about the dress example before, like, okay, that dress looks fine on you. That's like textbook example, but like, are there times where you do things like that?
I would tell people to just tell the truth. Unless it's going to hurt someone, tell the truth.
Are there any times where you can completely understand where a person was coming from when they lied, right? Like if you were in their circumstance, you would have lied too.
Well, we've had spouses tell us, there's no way I can confess. He's already beat me many times over this. But we don't know if they're making that up either. And we tell them, if you want to take a test, we'll test you. But don't try to prejudice us by saying what you're saying now, or we have to send you to another examiner.
What is like the most times in a row that somebody just has lied, like repeatedly over and over and over again, and then you're like, okay, we'll test you again, or we'll send you to another examiner, and like they still lie, and they've come back with like 50 different lies, or rather 50 different times where they're just not telling the truth, and they're still going to adamantly deny and say that they're telling the truth.
Sometimes it's a no win for them. They've already failed and there's no benefit to confessing. It'll just rather that their spouse or family believes maybe they told the truth than removing that coverage by just admitting they did the crime. But we do odd ones. We do housekeepers where they find money and they get tempted and take it. But a lot of housekeepers have learned from other housekeepers, if you find money or an earring or a diamond ring, go hide it in a bookshelf somewhere. That way, if you're polygraphed and they ask, did you take it? Did you remove any jewelry from this house without permission? They can pass a polygraph. They didn't remove jewelry from the house. So some examiners don't know about modifying the questions to take care of the ones that didn't really remove the jewelry yet from the house.
What do you wish that you would see? Not, and this isn't even just regarding your job, but like in general, like nowadays, or not even nowadays, but what do you just wish that people would do, in terms of, being moral or, being better people? Like, what do you just wish that you would totally never see again, like in a lie detector? Just you wish that people would stop coming in for this, not because it's annoying, but just because it's so bad or it's immoral.
I would be happy if everyone stopped cheating and stopped stealing. We'd still get enough work from police applicants and other things like that, other job situations. It would be nice if there was no crime and no relationship cheating.
What do you think the world needs more of in general nowadays?
I don't know if more people got jobs, perhaps they wouldn't have too much time on their hands and start doing crimes.
Do you have any advice for anybody listening at all?
We can use more polygraph examiners if anybody wants to do that. In most states, it's fairly easy to get into it. Not all states have training, but you can travel to other states for the training. There's usually no poor polygraph examiners. Now, in California, where there's only perhaps one polygraph business for every 2 counties, if you averaged it like that, heck, if there was only one plumber per county, he or she would be pretty well off. But not everybody uses polygraph. It's just we get calls from all over the state and all over the country. And in most areas, we tell them there's nobody within 400 or 500 miles of you. We have had people call us and say, do you have anyone in my area? I've called everybody I can find in Google, and they either don't answer or they say they're retired. I said, well, your state happens to have pretty easy requirements to get into it. Unless you've got a better career going, think about getting in polygraph. You've already done the research. You see that it's impossible to find a polygraph examiner in your area that wants to work. That means there's other people like you too that have just given up on using a polygraph. Now, a lot of the polygraph associations and clubs, and that's what they are, they're not a government agency. One of them put out a bulletin a couple of decades ago saying, do not cooperate with any filmed project. It's not good for our profession. But they added, if it's important, refer it to this guy because he's a good rep for us. And that made a lot of people unhappy. But I've seen the opposite. I've seen that when polygraph appears on a talk show, and I do a lot of nighttime talk shows and game shows and fun things and serious things, for the next couple of weeks, there's a lot of calls nationwide, people to think, hey, I could use a lie detector test. And we've heard it called the Oprah effect or the Joe Rogan effect. And it works.
Now, just for fun, who was your favorite celebrity to work with?
We've had fun times like Mark Wahlberg, those kind of people for movie premieres and other publicity, some sports people, all the big YouTubers and TikTokers and Instagram. Because what a lot of them do is, well, first, they're making their money based on views in most cases. So that if they can come up with a little thumbnail for the public to click on that has them crying and it says, I just failed a lie detector test and guess what my girlfriend found out, they'll get an extra 1,000,000 views and that's another 20 or 30,000 in their pocket.
Well, now with regards to like celebrities and ultra rich people, and you don't have to name the person, obviously. I probably couldn't anyways, but I was going to say that has there ever been a famous person in private that has come to you, not for a show, but just has privately come to you, or an ultra wealthy person that's come to you with similar problems that you deal with every other day?
Yes, I mean, that happens quite a bit. One time a guy came in and first I got a call from a talent agency representing him in Beverly Hills saying, I need you to sign a non-disclosure contract, and this has to be secret, and you can't even tell your friend. Okay. So it brought in some guy, and I said, who are you? Are you one of those hot new young actors? He goes, yeah, something like that. And it was just to know if he had volunteered. Turned out he was a sports guy. Did you voluntarily consume any steroid or some sort of performance enhancing drug? And he passed. And it turned out he was a big sports person, and it dropped his suspension. Then 5 years later, similar thing happened. And he said, I'm not going to take a lie detector test this time because this time I did it. I actually took the performance enhancing drugs.
Would I know this person, like off the top of my head?
Yeah, you could even just Google baseball player polygraph steroids. We do testing at natural bodybuilding contests where sometimes the prize is so big that it causes cheating, like a $50,000 Ford four-wheel truck, or maybe more expensive than that. And it tempts them to use one of the banned steroids or human growth hormone. Or we've done fishing ones over the year where sometimes the rules are you have to go out and fish in front of us for the next 3 hours, and it's only in a certain area with certain lures. Sometimes they'll go out the day before, they'll go much deeper water, they'll use much better lures, and they'll catch a much bigger fish, and they'll keep it on water overnight, and then they'll sneak it onto the boat for the competition and pretend they caught it. Or they'll take their fish and then they'll stuff down its throat lead, and then they'll stick a chicken cutlet, perhaps, follow it. Someone opens the mouth big enough and looks down there, it looks like the fish guts instead of lead.
All right. I think that's a good place to end off. Any final words to the audience? I'm going to stop the recording, by the way, and then we'll talk a little bit after the show here.
If anybody's thinking of taking a lie detector test, they can call us anytime for a free consultation. Doesn't matter what state they're in. We don't need their name. We'll give them the same advice on how to get the most accuracy, which isn't saying how to cheat or get a better score. If you're lying, it's just going to be more accurate that way too. But a lot of examiners don't give in the pre-instructions things they should have that could have increased the accuracy. Like if you come in dehydrated, we have to amplify the sweat so much just to get it on the screen that when you do have even close to a lie, it looks like a volcano on the screen, and you fail just because it was adjusted so sensitive. Not all examiners tell you answer with your mouth only. That's why when we see videos of people that failed and were hired for the retest, we can spot they failed because they shook their head, not because they lied.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you for your time.
Cool.